Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today to discuss how local authorities will be using IoT and digital technologies to tackle COVID-19 and spur recovery. My name's John Pattinson. I'm an IoT product lead at the Digital Catapult, and today we'll be discussing the current landscape in local authorities, how COVID-19 has impacted the day-to-day runnings of local authorities and the services offered, as well as the budgets that have been released to support recovery. Our teams will talk about the ways that technology can support recovery and exciting new use cases in the IoT space and introduce the IoT for Local Authorities program. This is a scheme that's running in support of local authorities in framing their challenges and working with startups to answer and support these challenges through new technological solutions. We'll end today's presentation with panel discussion. We have some exciting speakers from South Kesteven Council, IoT Solutions Group, and Councillor Neil Pryor from LGA. IoT for Local Authorities programme is a joint initiative between the Digital Catapult and the Connected Places Catapult. Digital Catapult is the UK's leading advanced digital technology centre, and we drive early adoption of technology to make UK businesses more competitive and productive with the aim of growing the UK economy. Connected Places Catapult seeks to grow UK PLC business innovation across the built environment, infrastructure, mobility, well-being, and other domains that we would describe as place. So by working together, we bring our joint expertise in the technology and the built environment, positioning us expertly to work with local authorities through a transformational technological journey. So I'll introduce today's speakers. We have Rukmini, who's IoT Product and Partnerships Manager at Digital Catapult, Gary Andrew from South Kesteven Council, Neil Force from the IoT Solutions Group, as well as Yelena Coleman, who's a solution architect, and Lottie McNair, who's a design research manager, and they're both from the Connected Places Catapult. So before we get started, just a bit of housekeeping. So just to note that this session will be recorded. So if you happen to have to drop out for any reason, the recording will be available afterwards. Also, we'll mute everyone's microphone and have the cameras switched off to avoid any distractions to the speakers. But you are still able to answer or ask any questions that you have via the Q&A box, which you should see on your menu. Also, what would be really great is if you could also vote on other people's questions, and we get an idea of what people are most interested in having discussed during the panel. So I'll hand over to the team who will be hosting, and I'll be hosting the panel at the end once we've had the speakers. So first speaker we have is Yelena. So over to you, Yelena.
Morning, everyone. I'm Yelena, and I'm from the Connected Places Catapult. And to start off the webinar today, we'd like to take a look at some of the key applications of IoT within a local authority context. Councils have increasingly been directing more resources towards digital transformation initiatives, and this is to increase efficiency and promote innovation. Data-led decision-making helps optimize local government performance, and if we can achieve this, then we can free up valuable resources to be used in areas where they're most needed. One of the biggest opportunities for local authorities is presented by the emergence of the Internet of Things, or as we'll refer to it in this webinar, IoT for short. This includes connected devices, sensors, and control elements, which are connected to software platforms. And these can give councils the power to do things like remotely control and monitor condition of their assets, to issue work orders, to track workflows, and to optimize resource usage. One of the biggest potential overall benefits of IoT is to reduce cost and improve service delivery. Collecting data across IoT networks puts you in a really good position to make more informed decisions about your infrastructure and how to manage it in an economic and cost-effective way. And sensor-based technology can also enable you to make safety improvements. Next slide, please. This image here shows some IoT investment within local authorities. It comes from a report produced by IoT UK, and we can see that the top applications are environmental, transport and health, followed by energy, waste and buildings. I suspect since the report was produced, we might see health going further up that list, as there are many applications for IoT in that space. Next slide, please. To go over some common examples of IoT applications, social care is a big one. As an example, Sunderland Council uses IoT to help manage medication, to connect isolated people with loved ones and service providers, and remotely alert healthcare providers of emergencies. And this is all done using wearable technologies. Street lighting is another common use case. Sandwell Council uses IoT-enabled streetlights, which allows them to remotely manage brightness and lighting schedules. This delivers energy efficiency and maintenance cost-saving benefits. Their investment is expected to pay for itself before 7 years are up. Fleet management is another common one. Belfast Council uses fleet management and vehicle tracking systems to monitor driver safety and behavior and inform driver education programs. This helps facilitate safer driving and also reduces fuel costs. Many councils are using waste management IoT solutions. For this, they equip waste bins with sensors, which monitors levels of wastes and better informs emptying and pickup schedules. This can also be integrated with traffic level scenarios and helps to deliver cost savings. Smart parking is another very common application. Apps can be used to guide drivers to available parking spaces, making their life easier, lowering congestion, and also cutting vehicle emissions, which is really important as local authorities try to move towards our net zero targets. Next slide, please. So like any investment, IoT needs to be weighed up, the costs against the benefits. And as a part of a large IoT UK program, Future Cities Catapult previously developed an investment case toolkit, and this can be used to support local authorities in putting together strong and financially viable business cases for IoT interventions. A couple of examples of spend versus potential savings. If smart street lighting and smart in-building energy management systems were used in local government buildings, this could result in savings of around 400 million. Many people surveyed in urban areas would support their council if they were to invest in new technology to drive improved public services. An example from Sunderland City Council, they've implemented a project around assistive technology, and an independent evaluation has found that if this project was run beyond the pilot phase, there'd be the opportunity to save the council £3.7 million over 3 years. So as you can see, despite the fact that there would be some money needed to invest, we can see quite substantive savings coming from the use of IoT. Next, please. So if we look at some of the recent challenges that have been faced by local authorities, we've seen workforce issues due to self-isolation and quarantining of staff, and often this has led to a reduced ability to be able to provide statutory services. We've also seen council need to manage the well-being of their furloughed staff, to facilitate social distancing in public spaces, and also manage more frequent and deeper cleaning of public utilities. They've had to manage effective food distribution, including aid and medicine, manage the volunteer workforce, and also provide advice to citizens through new channels, which may not have been used before, such as WhatsApp groups. They've had to look at accommodating homeless, manage rent relief programs, and many, many other challenges. As local authorities prepare for longer-term impacts of COVID, we think that data is key to coordinating and managing this response. If we go on to look at some of the financial impacts that have been faced by local authorities. To go to next slide, please. We've seen reduced impact from business rates, parking payments, and a huge impact on the high street, with many local businesses struggling. We've seen additional costs due to adult social care and infection control, and increased welfare support, delivery of food, aid, and supplies to vulnerable residents. COVID-19 has had a very, very significant impact on local government finances when we were already in a difficult position following a decade in which resources have been cut. I'd now like to hand over to Rukmini. She will be covering some emergency relief funding areas which are available to local authorities.
Thank you, Yelena. So, as she said, COVID-19 has had a significant impact on local government finances, which were already in a difficult position following a decade in which overall resources have been cut severely. Local authorities have been at the forefront of the response to both the public health and economic crises caused by COVID-19, having mobilised rapidly and played a central part in coordinating the emergency response across public services in the UK. Local authorities across the country are among those on the front line of the coronavirus crisis, but geographical differences in demographic and economic structures make different parts of the country more vulnerable to different effects of the crisis, on health, on families and children, and on jobs and income. This means the demands and costs facing each local authority will change in different ways and at different times. Moreover, differences in the extent to which each local authority relies on different revenue sources and in their financial reserves and commitments means they face differing degrees of financial risk and have differing degrees of financial resilience. We know that councils have been affected by COVID-19 across a broad range of issues, including health and social impact, supporting your residents, particularly those within urban deprived areas or in regional spaces with limited access to medical care. The economic impact has been felt in a number of ways, whether that's related to local services not being used or cut, lack of funding, or specialisation in specific areas such as tourism. The government's response has been to provide direct funding and other supportive financial measures to lessen the impact on local government since March. This currently amounts to £4.3 billion in total, which centres around general emergency funding, targeted funding for specific services and purposes, cash to support businesses, and of course specific funding to lessen the impact of COVID-19. This includes non-ring-fence budgets to potentially support adult social care, children's services, public health services, fire and rescue, waste collection, shielding the vulnerable, homelessness and rough sleeping. Furthermore, there are allocated adult and social care funds, as well as funds for track and trace measures. Through innovative technology solutions, these funding pots can be used to support residents in your community, as well as save cost and time and money for the local authority. As we've mentioned, the Internet of Things has the potential to give you greater insights and data around how your local community are managing, whether that's around maintaining social distancing in queues or in transport, how effectively medication and vaccines are being transported and stored around your council area, or even understanding the management of your bin rota and how this could be done more efficiently. As always, please remember to submit your questions in the Q&A box on screen, and we will discuss these in the panel discussion at the end. I'll now hand over to Lottie to talk you through some IoT use cases in particular.
Hi everyone, thanks Rukmini. I'm Lottie, I'm a design researcher at the Connected Places Catapult. I'm going to talk through some existing and potential sort of case studies of how IoT and general innovative technologies are being used or could be used to support local authorities in facing the challenges as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. So I guess just as a bit of an overview, some of the general example use cases that we've seen are looking at how the technology might help support facilitation of social distancing measures. Rukmini kind of touched on these. Also looking at air quality monitoring for local authority buildings. So kind of looking at how, whether the environment in terms of the air quality is sort of helping to support the staff, and then looking at medication and other supply deliveries, crowd management, so monitoring sort of how busy certain spaces are, and managing peaks to reduce congestion and facilitate social distancing, traffic flow management, so allowing people to travel around cities more easily, and also around navigation, so giving people information around public services like buses, parking spaces, and roadworks. So next slide, please. So I'll just talk through a few case studies. So our first case study is from Oldham Council. So Oldham Council were given the statutory duty to coordinate the kind of delivery and management of food, care and medical supplies to vulnerable groups. And they did this through 5 kind of virtual hubs to coordinate the management of all of those to around sort of 30 to 40,000 residents. So they had a need to understand the supply and demand. So to understand what had been donated, how long it would last, how it needed to be stored and where it had been delivered. And obviously with a lot of parcels coming in from different places, they needed to develop a new solution to do that. So in partnership with a local company, they developed a stock management system, which consisted of kind of barcodes on each item and package, so that they could effectively create kind of an inventory of all the food that was received with information on like nutritional value, life cycle and stock volume. And so parcels were scanned in as they came in and then scanned again as they were sent out again. And that essentially helped them to create a better understanding of the flow of supplies and donations from kind of scattered sources and then to scattered people. Next slide. So the idea of kind of managing supplies effectively is obviously an issue that's come up a lot as a result of the of COVID-19. So as one of the concepts of how councils could also use IoT to manage the delivery and the effective provision of those supplies to people who are shielding or self-isolating. Obviously, one of the issues that came up very early on was that finding delivery slots from food suppliers was very difficult as they were kind of there was very high demand. So IoT could help, for example, in monitoring the food supply of people who maybe are vulnerable or are less able to access food resources themselves. So for example, councils could install kind of food or like sort of weight sensors in fridges or using kind of smart fridge technology to understand the level of food supply. So that when someone, say, for example, is shielding, has a lot of food in their fridge, councils can be confident that person is kind of sorted for a while. And then once the supply level goes down, for example, that could automatically book a delivery slot for someone to ensure that they're definitely going to have access and that they're not sort of susceptible to running out of food. And then that means that once the supply level is very low, then the kind of delivery already arrives and there's no need to worry about booking a delivery or doing anything last minute. Next slide, please. So the second case study that we'll look at is Newcastle and how they're using computer vision to track footfall in the city centre. So obviously another issue that's come up is the need to socially distance and obviously the kind of need to allay the fears of citizens who might be worried about how confident they can be in socially distancing in city centres based on kind of how busy the city centre is. So Newcastle City Council worked with some partners to develop this online tool which focuses on the kind of high street area and uses footfall counting sensors which kind of use computer vision cameras essentially to track footfall data on a number of streets in the city. It's updated every 5 minutes. And then this platform updates, giving people a kind of traffic lights warning of how busy the city centre is and therefore how easy it's likely to be to socially distance. So this was actually developed previously. So the Newcastle University's Urban Observatory already had this data for just for kind of looking at high street data, and then since the lockdown, that data has then been repurposed for the purposes of allowing people to understand social distancing measures. And there's been more than 25,000 visits to the site since it's launched in July, and it's now being expanded to other areas in the city as well. Next slide, please. So obviously, this is something that I know quite a few councils have been looking at, is doing footfall monitoring in the city centre. And obviously there's one aspect of this which is around kind of understanding busyness for the purposes of people visiting the city centre and giving them a bit of, or not even necessarily the city centre, but just giving people confidence in how easy it is to distance. But then another challenge, obviously, for businesses opening or sort of reopening after the lockdown was understanding kind of demand in terms of when spaces were busy and therefore when the best time was to open. So councils could also use similar technology and the same data to provide to businesses to help them understand when the busiest times are in the city centre or where they operate, to allow them to understand and sort of more effectively target their opening times, so that they don't spend too much time open when there's very little demand. Next slide. Thanks. So the last case study is from Sevenoaks, and it's kind of around facilitating socially distanced transport. So obviously, again, there was quite a lot of uncertainty for people around making necessary journeys, particularly people who don't have private vehicles and needed to use public transport, and doing that in a way which still allowed for social distancing. So Sevenoaks developed a digital solution to provide on-demand, affordable ride sharing for people who needed to make necessary journeys, whether that was sort of key workers getting to work, or people picking up groceries and medication, etc. And they used a fleet management solution to manage a set of vehicles and buses to facilitate those journeys, and help people to ensure that they could make those journeys in a way that was sort of facilitated being distanced. And this was, kind of through an on-demand model. It was an app that was made available, and is being looked at expanding to other areas, to kind of new areas, to cover more areas which are more kind of isolated as well. Next slide, please. So obviously this kind of issue of having to facilitate social distancing on public transport is something that is affecting a lot of councils. And so there's also, I guess, a need to do that in a way that kind of allows normal public transport solutions to pick up again. So there's kind of this idea that perhaps footfall counting technology, or just general people counting technology, could allow people to understand the busyness of public transport systems before they board them, and then potentially provide information back to them and suggest alternatives to people who are concerned about how difficult it might be to maintain distancing on, like, an approaching bus, for example, as well. So I'm now going to pass back over to Rukmini to talk a little bit more about the IoT for Local Authorities programme.
Thanks very much, Lottie. Just a reminder, please submit all your questions in the box on screen. So whether these are technical questions about IoT or just questions around how local authorities are managing the COVID crisis, really invite our panelists to share their experiences on how best to deploy technology within local government environment. We invite any and all questions around sort of tech and local government. We've got a very exciting panel lineup, so a mix of a startup, a representative from South Kesteven Council, and Councillor Neil Pryor from the LGA. So they're all very excited to discuss all things technology. So just a reminder, if you have any questions, pop them in the box at the bottom of your screen. So this part of the presentation will look at the IoT for Local Authorities programme. This is a joint Digital Catapult and Connected Places Catapult initiative to support local authorities in addressing some of the challenges we discussed today around delivering local services in the current climate. So these challenges might be driven by COVID, such as people counting or delivering medicine safely, or non-COVID related things like bin collection or fly tipping. So I'll talk you through at a high level the outline of the programme and highlight some of the key activities local authorities will be engaging in. The purpose of the programme is to support local authorities in answering these challenges by connecting them to innovative startups working in the space, and supporting these startups in developing products and technology solutions that solve these challenges quickly and cost effectively. The programme will launch in 2021, and following this webinar, we will send you an email with some more information. So, local authorities will apply to the programme, and following a simple application and selection process, will select the successful councils to join the cohort. To kick off the programme, we'll run an in-depth introduction to IoT and help you understand how it plays out in the local authority ecosystem. This will be a friendly session and by no means deeply technical, more to set the scene and discuss in further detail context around IoT in the local authority network, as well as case studies where this has been effectively deployed. The teams at Digital Catapult and Connected Places Catapult will work with the local authority representatives around challenge scoping and framing to help you shape the challenge and really pull out the salient points of tension. After the challenge is established for each local authority, we will utilise the innovator networks of both CPC and DC to run open calls to startups. We'll publish the challenge and down select a number of exciting startups that we feel can respond to your challenge. Following this, we will invite local authorities to attend pitch sessions where the startups will pitch their solutions to the local authorities and explain why they feel they are best suited to answer the challenge. Connected Places Catapult and Digital Catapult will support in making this decision and offering guidance on the decision based on technical capabilities and ease of deployment. We will then host a kickoff event and discovery day. This is an opportunity for the local authorities to articulate their challenges in further detail to the chosen startups. Following this, startups will have the opportunity to visit the local authorities and regions in person and see firsthand to contextualize the challenges in more detail. This might be a visit to the different sites in your region, whether that's a hospital, public transport infrastructure, or fly tipping sites. Following this scoping, the deployment of solutions will begin. Technical support and guidance from Digital Catapult and Connected Places Catapult will be provided to the IoT startups and local authorities during the programme and deployment of solutions. We will be on hand to support with deployment advice, assessments, and guide both local authorities and startups alike. Experts from both Connected Places Catapult and Digital Catapult will have oversight of all activities and project manage any deployments, as well as support in constant evaluation of predetermined success criteria. The end of the programme will culminate in a showcase of the challenges and solutions, followed by an impact assessment. Impact assessments will be done to validate the success of IoT solutions and deployments for the problems facing local authorities, and Digital Catapult and Connected Places Catapult will support local authorities in sustainably deploying these solutions in the future. I hope that was a useful introduction to the IoT for LA programme, and as mentioned, following the webinar, we'll send out further information. I'm now going to hand over to Gary Andrew, Digital Technology Lead at South Kesteven Council, who have been through the programme in the past, to talk about their experience on the programme and some exciting technology deployments they have undertaken. As always, remember to submit any questions you have in the box. Over to you, Gary.
Thank you. So as just said, my name's Gary Andrew. I'm from South Kesteven District Council. We did a project last year with Digital Catapult on our intelligent streetlights. If you want to go to the next slide, please. So just before I start, because the first question I normally get asked is, what is South Kesteven District Council? So we're a district in the East Midlands in Lincolnshire. We are a largely rural district with 80 villages and 4 towns. Most people's experience of South Kesteven Council is Grantham, and that's usually if you're on a train from London, from King's Cross, you normally pass through Grantham on your way north, which is probably the best way I can describe it. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. So we looked at IoT 2 years ago as a technology. It wasn't something we could sort of come to in our normal way of going to a framework, as anybody from a council will know, to look at how we can do that. It was obviously fairly new technology and fairly unexplored. So after doing some research, we came across the Digital Catapult, and as luck would have it, we're just about to do their showcase event for round 3 of their IoT challenge. So I attended that, looked at some of the previous councils that had done it, and realised it was a really good way for us to be introduced to Internet of Things with a partner. So we joined the round 4 of the project, and then having looked around, we decided to do some intelligent streetlights. The main reason for that was that we haven't really yet done anything with our streetlights. So we are, I think, 99% still on the sodium-based lights. So it was a really good opportunity to look at replacing, as well as replacing them with LED, actually putting some technology in there as well. Now, not just to control the lights, but also to do things like air quality, footfall monitors, you'll see as we go forward. We also declared a climate emergency as well. So it's a really good, an energy project was really good and dovetailed in with that. Next slide, please. So We looked at, oops, I think I've gone forward one too many, sorry, that's my fault. So currently we have 4,000 streetlights in our area. Majority of the streetlights are in South Castile and are actually owned by the county council. So what we look after is mostly the village lights, car parks, footpaths, etc. The sodium lights are also on a 3-year clean and replacement cycle, so therefore there are quite high costs, and obviously an LED light is normally guaranteed for around 10 years, so we reduce a lot of maintenance costs as well. Okay, if you want to go to the next slide, please. So what we're hoping to achieve from this, so obviously we're looking at saving on the energy, which is an obvious one that LED will do. Again, improve reliability of the lighting stock. What we'd like to do is actually know when a light is going wrong. So rather than wait on a customer to ring up who's already frustrated that their street light isn't working or it's flashing outside their house, we'd like to know that and actually get it replaced before that customer even reports it. Everything now is information based. So we are always looking for ways to make better decisions based on information. So being able to collect lighting information, amount of footfall past a street light, we can make decisions on policies such as do we dim them, do we turn them off, with proper data behind that decision. As I've previously said, we'd also like to collect additional information. So the ability to collect air quality or footfall would be really helpful. Okay, next slide, please. So the solution, so having gone through the process with Digital Catapult, so just to talk about that a little bit. So what we did, we partnered with them. They helped us set the challenge that we required. They then advertised that through their portals, and I think we had 5 suppliers who put forward a solution. We did a sort of a meet the suppliers day where they did a pitch to us, and we sat. I think they called it the Dragon's Den session, where we sat and we assessed what they were offering, and have gone through that with representatives from ourselves and from Digital Catapult. We ended up working with a company called arbnco. They're an SME, as were all the suppliers, and again it was really helpful because it's not really a market of suppliers we'd as a council normally be able to work with, so it was really helpful. So they provided a solution where they would replace a set number of lights, and they'd install some additional technologies as well, so we could run a 6-month pilot and get some really good data. Next slide, please. So again, for part of that pilot is we settled on 3 locations, 2 in Stamford and 1 in Grantham. One was a footpath where we were going to test footfall monitoring and intelligent dimming, like you would with a PIR in your own property. And then the other 2 were a car park and a bus station. Again, we set to see what the sort of footfall was, and also we had an air quality monitor at the bus station, which we thought would be really useful. Next slide, please. So again, there's a little bit more information. Some of these slides have got quite a bit of information on. I'm not going to talk through it all, but as was said at the start, the presentation and the slides will be available at the end. So there may be some useful things on here for people to read afterwards. But yeah, so we put in 8 lights at Stamford, and we put in 4 at Winchester Road. So I want to go to the next slide, please. So to control the lights, we use some software called Mayflower for the pilot. And again, this shows how they're plotted onto a map. So going through the console, you can actually go to an individual light and look at the properties of that light, see how it's working, see what it's been doing. So it's really intuitive through the console on how you can do that. Next slide, please. This is, if you can see this is basically to show you the level that you can actually control the lights to. So you can set a schedule on a daily basis on what those lights are doing, either individually or as a collection. So you can have times they come on and go off. You can set whether they just use the onboard photo sensor to go on and off as a traditional street light would when it gets to a certain light level. You can dim them at certain times of night. You can turn them off at certain times of night and turn them back on. I think it was something like 24 different profiles per light per day that you could set. So you could get lost in this for days if you chose to do so. Obviously, we wouldn't do that. One of the things that they did say to us, though, which we've not considered, is certain events of the year, such as bonfire night, you might actually want to dim your street lights because obviously people are watching fireworks and what they don't want is street lights blaring while they're looking. So there are certain times of year where you may want to actually have a different profile for your lights. Also, Christmas light switch on was another use for them. Next slide, please. So this gives us some idea of what we actually achieved by doing this pilot, this small pilot. So before we started this, the 12 lights that we had actually had a total power of just under 1200 watts. By just changing an LED on their own, actually we half that power consumption, so 50% reduction just by putting in LED. However, by able to then set them to dim for a certain amount of time, for our pilot we just did 3 hours overnight just to show it worked, and on the footpath by reducing it by 50% when there was no motion within a certain time limit. What happens then is if somebody walked towards the light, that light came on, but also the next ones came on in series as well, so the person walking along was always walking towards the brighter light. And again, that produced it again, so we're actually using only 300 watts when dimmed, so that actually reduced the, if we dim them all the time, that reduced it to 75%. So again, we could use this information to make decisions. Next slide, please. Also, as I say, we also use other technology as well. So at Stamford bus station, we installed an air quality sensor. You'll see on screen all the different types of air quality it could sense, which was really useful. This was also powered by the street light as well, so there was no additional power source required, which was really useful. The only part is a cartridge that has to be replaced on an annual basis, which is much easier than what we're using now for vital health. Next slide, please. So this again is the dashboard from the air quality sensor. So that was giving us temperature data, particle information. It sounds silly, but we were able to show that obviously during the lockdown that the air quality improved, which is an obvious thick statement to say, but actually in the past we'd have just said that. What we can actually do now is using the data and the graphs, we can actually show to our various environment committees and councillors that here's how much it's reduced by, here, you know, actually give documented and data evidence to what we're saying rather than just saying that information. So it would turn out to be really useful to demonstrate how the air quality improved over the last few months. Next slide, please. So this is just some very small images of what we did on the project. So this shows a light that's at the car park, which is it's a T light with a double header on there. The installation of a light going in, and obviously the one at the other side is from the bus station, and you may not be able to see that very well, but halfway up the lamppost is the air quality sensor sat on that lamppost. Next, please. So as a result of the pilot, let's just say we've collected 6 months of data. It's been really, really helpful. We've done it, or we're in the middle of a procurement process now to replace all 4,000 streetlights. We've been able to take the data that we've captured from this pilot to put into that project to explain about what we'd like. We've included a CMS solution as part of that procurement tender for put towards the suppliers and explained exactly what we'd like that to do. So that's been really helpful. From an Internet of Things point of view, we've got plans to start installing a LoRaWAN network. We did receive 2 gateways as part of the project through the Digital Catapult. We've obviously got plans to install many more across the district, which will complement the streetlight project and where the lights are going, and also give us scope to use other IoT applications as well. We're also looking at a small pilot in putting multiple small amounts of sensors out for different projects such as parking, environmental, inside buildings, waste bin collection information. And again, just 2 or 3 of each. We can then collect data from those sensors, take that data, put it back to the committee, the environment committee, and say, look, we'd like to install parking sensors in our car park, and we can show this is what they can be used for because we've got that data we've captured doing this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gary. Thanks for that really insightful introduction to IoT at South Kesteven Council. As always, please submit any questions you have into the Q&A box. Gary from South Kesteven will be joining our panel discussion at the end, so happy to answer any questions you have directly about the work they've done, their experience in the IoT for LA programme, and learnings around the streetlight implementation project. I'll hand over now to Neil Force, CTO and co-founder of IoT Solutions Group, a startup that have been through the IoT for LA programme, to talk about their experience. Please submit any questions you have for him directly in the box, and following his presentation, we will bring in our panel. As part of this, we also have Councillor Neil Pryor from the LGA and Pembrokeshire County Council joining. He's a champion of digital and happy to discuss all things digital implementation. For now, Over to you, Neil, CTO and co-founder of IoT Solutions Group.
Thank you. Hello and good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. A brief introduction of our company, IoT Solutions Group. We are a solutions provider for IoT. Hopefully the name of our company is quite self-explanatory. We are a company that has been working very significantly over the last 2 years with local authorities. And we have been focusing on local authorities due to a long period of collaboration that we have been on a very productive and interesting journey. So can you move to the next slide, please? I'll start really with an embarrassing photograph. This was taken when we were awarded a Platinum Award by Digital Catapult. We've been working with Digital Catapult from the outset of the instantiation of our business. And during that time, over the last 3 years, we have been the winner of 3 local authority challenges. They were with Bournemouth Borough Council, BCP Council now, Watford Council and Thurrock Council. Various challenges were met, and we succeeded in putting together a system solution for each that was very well received. We're also a grant winner. The FED4 SAE is part of the Horizon 2020 budget, and we've really been focusing on not just a benefit, in terms of business, but we're very much aligned to making sure that everything we do is aligned to a benefit for each local authority that we work with. So next slide, please. So what do we address? We are very mindful that the climate that we are all experiencing today is interesting and unprecedented in many regards. But there are some constants. Those constants being the budgetary pressures of the local authorities, even now more acutely felt after COVID-19, as our increased social care needs. And COVID-19 has not only made this more of an acute problem because of the risk to the elderly, infirm and vulnerable, but also to the care staff themselves being isolated and not being able to perform their duties. So there are areas with which IoT can very much assist and address those. We also focus on compliance issues, the burden to councils, local authorities and businesses alike. But legislation for health and safety as well as environmental legislation is significant and growing. And the automation of monitoring aspects of process can greatly reduce the costs and improve accuracy of compliance. And another element to the benefits that we provide in the challenges that we address is the crowding issues, as mentioned before. I think Lottie mentioned earlier the footfall case. We have deployed footfall counters in local authorities that really address many needs associated to not only monitoring the well-being of business as a whole, but also social distancing and keeping people safe. Next slide, please. So as an example of these unprecedented times, here is an example. We've installed some significant number of smart bin sensors on Bournemouth Beach, and only recently, in June, there was a major incident declared. These kind of numbers invading a space weren't foreseen, and how these are dealt with is a huge burden. On that particular event, 41 tons, yes, 41 tons of rubbish was cleared from Bournemouth Beach in just 48 hours. So these waves of events can be a huge health problem, a huge cost problem, but more importantly, a burden in management that can be very costly if not implemented with cost-efficient processes, and we aim to achieve that, and we've proven to do so. Next slide, please. So as an example of one local authority, we're working with many, but as an example, we won a challenge through the Digital Catapult for parking. And that parking challenge, instigated by Digital Catapult and Watford Council together, we were very delighted to win that challenge in deploying parking sensors in the borough to not only to guide cars and visitors to empty spaces to minimize the traffic and the environmental impact of visitors in their vehicles, but also for local authority governance of CPZs. The residents were very unhappy with visitors using their resident bays illegally, and the efficiencies of being able to detect a non-registered vehicle in a resident bay was a huge problem. So we've addressed that problem in Watford. We've deployed parking sensors in residential bays, and we have a mechanism by which we can signal immediately there's an infringement. And we use the same technology for taxi ranks. If a illegitimate taxi is in a rank that shouldn't be there, it's not registered, chancing its arm on a Saturday night, trying to make some extra cash, it's not licensed, etc., then we can flag and detect a illegitimate taxi in a rank immediately, and there can be intervention. So having won that challenge, we engaged further purely in a consultant manner. We're very engaged with each and every local authority. We tend to understand their problems before we try and find solutions. And there are elements to Watford's story that enabled us to really build a multitude of system solutions in waste management, smart bins. We leveraged our deployments and our system solutions that we'd already deployed in Bournemouth. Legionella compliancy, monitoring pipe temperatures, emergency lighting. The overhead in compliance with emergency lighting is hugely significant. And footfall monitoring, as I mentioned earlier, we've installed footfall monitors on the high street, and we've proven without doubt the benefits to the borough in this regard. Next slide, please. So one of the aspects that we have focused on in the advent of COVID-19 is assisted living. In as much that, we understand that many councils have a responsibility for the well-being of elderly, infirm, and vulnerable. And in doing so, with COVID-19, not only do we know Emma, my business partner, co-founder, having contracted COVID-19, the first thing that happens is the lethargy kicks in, and you become very ill very quickly. So what another negative side effect of COVID-19 is the fact that staff themselves are either isolating or ill. So we've built a wholly unobtrusive assisted living monitoring solution. It looks a bit like this. It comes through the post to the end user. The end user opens the envelope. There are no switches, no buttons, nothing to press. There's just a white box. And they put it in the kitchen shelf and they leave it there. And we can monitor the well-being of that service user by asserting that they are active. And we can monitor the human activity per unit time and assert a pattern of behavior. And we use AI analytics, artificial intelligence in the cloud to monitor a pattern of behavior. And when there's a deviation, then we're able to deploy a alert, a notification to the relevant registered carer for that person, so that they can prioritize their efforts and their focus in making sure that those that are at the highest risk get the attention first. So just one example of how we work with local authorities in building system solutions that as time moves on, we need to be agile to listen to the needs of those boroughs to build solutions that resonate. And we're working closely with multiple local authorities, significant local authorities in London as well as other areas, and in Ireland on this deployment for assisted living and specifically for the detection of the elderly or infirm or vulnerable in the wake of COVID-19. So I hope that gives you an insight to our organisation. We'll be delighted to have a conversation with anyone on the panel. There's a graph at the end here that shows the assisted living example, where we can monitor environmental conditions and alert when the change in behaviour becomes prevalent. There's also our web address at the bottom there. So thank you for your time and the opportunity to introduce our company. We look forward to speaking to you individually moving forward, and would love to help you move efficiencies in your own domain forward longer term. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. And thank you also to all of the other presenters excuse me, for sharing those interesting insights into how local authorities can use IoT technologies to drive improvements for local people. And also the role that Digital Catapult and Connected Places Catapult is playing in navigating these technologies and ensuring that they add value. So next, to introduce our panelists for today's discussion. So you'll see them now all appearing on their videos. So we have Councillor Neil Pryor, who's Cabinet Member for Transformation at Pembrokeshire County Council, and also the Deputy Chair of the LGA's Improvement and Innovation Board. We have Gary Andrew, who's Future Technology Lead for South Kesteven Council. Then Neil Force, founder and CEO of IoT Solutions Group. Rukmini Prasad, who's the IoT Product and Partnerships Lead at Digital Catapult. And then Elena Coleman, who's a Solution Architect, Connected Places Catapult. Okay, so just to kick things off, I have a couple of general questions, and then we've had a really great response in the Q&A board. So thank you very much for those questions, and do please keep voting as well and submitting other questions, and I'll also try to pick up any of those if they're particularly showing up there. So the first question that I have for the panel is, how are you working differently as a result of the COVID lockdowns? So I'd ask that question first to Neil Pryor.
Thank you, John. No pressure then with the first question. Well, everything has changed, isn't it? Everything is different. So from a councillor's perspective, the first thing is that I've been into County Hall once in the last 6 months. I've done all my work from home, which I was obviously very comfortable doing beforehand. That's been a big change. Clearly the hours exercise, I think that was a big change in the early days. So personally, I've got fitter during lockdown. I took the opportunity to make sure that I looked after myself. So there's a couple of very simple changes there. But from a councillor's perspective, and I don't know how many people on the call today have had the opportunity to engage with councillors, but everything has changed. You know, it's far more community based. There's a lot more that I'm doing with local residents. I've really tried to step up and take a local leadership role to reassure, to offer support and to communicate clearly. With the cabinet responsibility, there's been much to wrestle with what was called the democratic deficit in the early days. You've got gold command structures that have been put in place where local councils are exceptionally good at responding to a crisis. So we've had to deal with that. We've had to move all our democratic meetings online. Yeah, it's just been, you know, it's completely different. Everything feels like it's upside down. The demands on the councils and how we've had to help people stop things, and then that was the easy part, then start to reopen services. The budget, you know, we've got some huge challenges there. So yeah, everything has changed, everything.
Okay, thank you, Neil. And so the Next person I would hand this question to would be Gary Andrews.
Hi, yeah, so very similar to what Neil's just said, that obviously we've been working from home for 6 months. It was interesting, we had the infrastructure in within our IT department, but we were doing a very slowly rollout approach, and then someone said, just give it to everybody. So there was a bit of a panic, would it work? And actually, you know, it turned out we should have trusted our IT processes, because we went from sort of 50 people working from home to 400 people working from home overnight, which went really well. Yeah, I mean, lots of quick challenges that have come up, setting up council meetings to all councillors be at home. The challenge of ringing 50 councillors to make sure they know how to load into Skype isn't as easy as it might sound. But we got there. You know, setting up forms for business rate payments that we had to, you know, we couldn't get a week's notice, and we need to get a form out to all businesses so they could claim a business rates payment, which they really need. I've even been involved in a project where we were getting information about all our old and vulnerable residents, using things like electoral rolls, so finding different data sources to find out who those people are, calling them up and offering them a befriending service to make sure that they're not isolated and alone. And again, you know, monitoring those on a weekly basis, so that, and people really appreciated just that 5-minute call from a council officer, just to make sure you're all right. Do you need any medication picking up? Are you all right for shopping? And obviously those people just want, you know, they just chatted for an hour if we'd have let them. Unfortunately, we've obviously got a lot of people to go through, but there's so much reactive stuff we've had to do. It's been a challenge, but it's been really interesting.
Okay, great. And so Neil Force, from the solution provider perspective, how have things changed?
So things have changed incredibly in many respects, and in other aspects, not so. Let me explain a little. In terms of business and opportunities, performing installations in a COVID lockdown, prohibitively difficult. But you know, you have to pick your window, and you have to make sure that your team are mobilized at the right time, and that you've enabled your risk management and you align to whatever legislation is in place at that time. So very difficult to navigate, but not impossible and not insurmountable. We've always managed to overcome. The other aspect to COVID is the opportunity it creates, as well as it stalled a lot of projects. For example, a few parking sensors have been delayed in install because people are working from home. They're not needing to move their cars so much outside their house as they were. So obviously projects get delayed, not cancelled, luckily. But other opportunities have come around, you know. So we've accelerated our assisted living solutions so that we can monitor the vulnerable completely unobtrusively, and that's resonating very well. We're moving very quickly with that. So there are new opportunities, stalled opportunities, and challenges in deployment. So those are huge changes. But areas that haven't changed, we're a technology company. From the outset of our business, everyone worked from home. We took the decision prior to COVID-19 ever being known about that we were a work at home company. We had no intention of ever having a commercial property. We have all our manufacturing in the UK, so we order on demand. We have our designers in the UK, our marketing team, our sales team, ranging from Weymouth to Bournemouth up to Watford, and is into Milton Keynes and other areas. So we're a work at home company, we're a technology company, and we're very comfortable with the fact that we minimize travel and our impact on the environment in that regard, and that's been our policy from the outset. So many changes, very significant changes, and also alignment to our initial philosophy from the outset of our business in terms of home working.
Okay, thank you. And so then, from the Connected Places Catapult perspective, Elena, how have things changed? Oh, you're just on mute at the moment, Elena.
Sorry, I think we've seen similar stallings of some type of projects, but then we've seen kind of big uptake in others. And if you remember that first slide that I spoke about, with health being around the kind of third level of investment, think we've seen that a lot more interest has been put from local authorities towards health applications, towards adult social care applications, and that element has really kind of taken a big step up since 2 years ago when that report was published. So I think that because that's been top of mind for most local authorities, they're looking at changing their investment strategy away from potentially things like lighting towards the most urgent and pressing issues, which are around care at the moment.
Yeah, makes sense. So finally, Rukmini, from Digital Catapult perspective.
Largely very similar, I think, to what we've heard from the other panelists. We are all working from home, but to Yelena's point, I think the projects that we're working on, we can see them sort of shifting in the direction of dealing with the urgent issues around social care. So I'm really interested to discuss some more of that. And I've seen some of the questions in the Q&A box actually are around sort of deployment of social care and GDPR and these kinds of things. So I'm looking forward to discussing these in some more detail.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Rukmini. So to the next question. So this one, we'll start off with Neil Pryor again for this one. So how are you encouraging digital transformation in local authorities?
It's a broad question. I'll give two perspectives there then, briefly. So first of all, in my own local authority in Pembrokeshire, I've been a councillor for 3 years. I worked in the technology sector beforehand, so I have a pretty good understanding. I would call myself a translator, someone who's not a technologist, but is able to understand the applications of technology and translate that to a business outcome. So what I looked to do when I arrived as a fresh-faced councillor 3 years ago was try to engender a sense of excitement around the possibilities of using technology. And I figured out pretty quickly that I could use the political process to gain support for that. So, you know, we've heard a lot from the speakers this morning who are absolutely spot on with the challenges around the finances. And so when you've got a narrative of cuts that has been ongoing for the past however many years it is now, and then you come in and say we need to invest in technology, which is what I did, then you need to be able to create that business case. So to champion digital transformation in my own authority, I told a story around how the world is changing and how we could provide better outcomes for people in our area, our wards, our county, by becoming more efficient through using technology. And so managed to get some investment into that area. And then really as a councillor, it's not for me to do that work. It's not for me to understand the fine detail, as long as I can demonstrate when I go back to the scrutiny committees that we are doing what we said we would do, which is providing better outcomes for people. Then that's how I champion that in my own authority, by giving people the space and the support politically that they need to be able to get on and innovate. From an LGA perspective, I'm a year in post with the LGA as a deputy chair of the Improvement and Innovation Board. There are lots of initiatives to support councils on their digital transformation. So whether it's masterclasses for councillors on how to be more digitally minded or using data more effectively, through to a digital connectivity program that is being launched next week actually to support councils on that journey. We've still got a lot of work to do in this area, but it's something I think, Rukmini, you said I'm a digital champion. Yeah, definitely. You know, there is such an opportunity for councils to continue to embrace this technology, and there's so much more we can do. So I hope that's a very brief answering of the question.
That's great to hear. Really important work that you're working on there. And Gary, from your perspective for South Kesteven, how are you addressing the digital transformation and the journey that you're taking there as a council?
Yeah, so obviously that is the main area what my role is for digital transformation. So we are looking at lots of ways to use technology to improve the service to the customer, and obviously also to if where we can to assist the council in cost savings and efficiencies. We live in an age now where people don't want to go into the council or don't want to send an email. They've got a phone in their hand and they're sending a message on Facebook, and they're expecting you as a council to respond to that Facebook, my bin's not been emptied again, kind of message, that they don't need to send you anything. Somebody at the council will see that message and they will pick it up and they will respond to them. So we're kind of trying to adapt to this new way. I mean, I'm too old to understand it all, but I have teenage children, and you know, I know they only have a type with a thumb now. So you know, that's what we're trying to work towards. So yeah, you know, it's important, and you know, we almost need to do it to not, you know, to stay where we are. We don't want to get left behind. But and obviously, it's been really helpful with the lockdown and COVID. You know, we've had to shut down all our customer service centres. A couple of years ago, that would have been a massive problem, because obviously, you know, it is the only access people have to certain council services is via face-to-face, and even telephone. You know, obviously our telephone's been reduced. So by having digital online services, we've been able to maintain a service level for customers that they expect using those digital means.
Yeah. Okay, so over to Rukmini next. So what are we doing at Digital Catapult to support councils in this area?
Thanks, John. Probably the best place to talk about the IoT for Local Authorities programme, which we mentioned throughout the presentation. And I've seen there's a number of questions that have come in about that. But really, this programme is aimed at supporting local authorities in understanding how to tackle these issues. So as I mentioned through the presentation, we'll work with yourselves at local authorities to actually shape what your challenges might be, and whether these are COVID specific, so tracking of medication, ensuring that any medication is stored in the right way, or social distancing, or even issues which are not COVID related, so bin counting we've seen has come up time and time again. We'll work with you to actually shape and understand what might be the most pressing challenges facing your local authority, and then working with startups such as IoT Solutions Group, who've been on the programme in the past, to actually deploy these with you successfully and really kind of hold your hand through the process to make this as easy a transition as possible. So that's really what a Digital Catapult and Connected Places Catapult are doing to support local authorities through this period. And as I said, after the webinar, we'll share information about the programme, where you can sign up, and the Q&A.
Okay, thanks, Rukmini. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to some questions from our Q&A board. So the first one is from Ian Ballantyne. This one got a good amount of votes. A lot of people really interested in this one. So can we get access, Ian says, can we get access to the details of these trials, technologies, how the deployments were managed, the business cases, and the end of trial reports? I'm running multiple IoT projects and working very hard to avoid reinventing the wheel. But there's a lot of publicity around various trials, but very real sort of hard facts on the learnings and how, you know, you can build on the learnings from that. So I'd maybe put this one to Yelena first.
So we run a program of living labs and demonstrators at the Catapult, at Connected Places Catapult, and through these, which are testing technologies in a real world environment, we like to share the learnings from that, either through reports or thought leadership published on our website. This really helps us to share across multiple local authorities. So what is learned from one can then often be kind of scaled across and used in others. The living labs and test beds either have place-based focus or they have specific technology focus. So you could have a living lab or a trial that's conducted in one local authority or one city or one town, or we could have test beds and trials that are focusing on 5G, for instance, or on immersive technologies or on IoT. So we have different types of elements that we run. So we do try to publish some of these facts. Some of them might be potentially sensitive, so in that case we aren't able to. But in general, what we are interested in sharing through these are the impacts. So what has been the financial impacts or the social impacts or the economic impacts that have come out of these test beds and trials. And in those cases, we do like to share and publish the results of what these have been so that others can learn from them and then pick this up and try and implement in their own environments.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And Rukmini?
Yeah, I was just going to say off the back of what Yelena was saying, specifically for the IoT for Local Authorities programme, we will share information about the local authorities that have been through the programme in the last few cohorts, findings, numbers, savings, all of these kinds of things. And some more of the information that Gary took us through today around the work at South Kesteven, that was very tangible, and it was kind of great to see how that was making a real difference very practically. So absolutely, we'll be sharing all of this information.
Okay, great. And Neil Force on this one.
Yes, absolutely. So we have a very strong relationship with our customers. We would love the opportunity to introduce anyone on this session to our existing customers. I know that one particular local authority, Watford, would be delighted to engage and discuss the benefits provided, all the documentation that we have to date, and engage so that we can convey all of that great value. The value is both quantitative and qualitative, and depending on the local authority, will have different balances. In addition, there are some trials that we have run with commercial partners, for example, the Ringo partner for parking. So there would be some NDA needed to share the data because of a competitive nature, but I'm sure that we can organise all of that if needed. Okay,
great, thank you. Okay, so then on to the next question. This one is from Philippe Mauzak. How do you intend to scale up solutions developed for one local authority to all of the others where they would apply? So maybe I'll start off this one with Neil Pryor, and just in general, not necessarily for the IoT focused projects, but how are you helping one local authority to scale up solutions maybe used by another local authority?
It's a good question. There is a real spirit of sharing, I think, actually, isn't there, amongst local authorities these days? So I would just say there's numerous places where you can go to find out this information. There's a whole dedicated case study section on the LGA website. There's lots of stuff that happens through the local digital group. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of sharing that happens. I know there's Hackney, I think, off the top of my head, are quite active. They do lots of sharing through week notes and their blogs. And as you're finding lots of authorities starting to adopt more agile approaches, they are very much more on the sharing mindset. So again, still got a way to go, but there is lots of information online. And I'm sure that we could send some links for the LGA case study site after this webinar as well.
Okay, great, thank you. Rukmini.
Actually, yeah, I was just going to add to that. Off the back of the IoT for Local Authorities programme, the final session is a showcase. So we invite all local authorities to attend this event anyway. So even if you don't participate in the programme as a challenge setter, you can still come along to this session to kind of learn about the different challenges that have been set by different local authorities and meet different startups that have participated in the programme. So again, that's a really easy way to learn about everything that's happened.
Okay, great. And Yelena?
Yeah, I'd echo making use of organisations such as Lottie within London, LGA, MHCLG's Local Digital. These are all really good initiatives that kind of bring together and are set up to share learnings across local authorities. So if any of you do participate in the programme and you are a part of one or more of those type of organisations or groups of local authorities, it would be great to share learnings there, or also, if you're not a part, you can ask those who have participated in various trials, whether it's part of this program or others, to share learnings across those. There's also UK Authority publish a lot of information about demonstrators and trials that are going on. And I think a fair amount of local authority people read those and kind of find out about what interesting is happening in other councils and what they may want to implement themselves.
Okay, great, thank you. So to a little bit more of a technical question here. We had quite a few questions for you, Gary, in the Q&A box. So I'll get just to a couple of those to start with. So this is a question from Sarah. Have you looked at and compared narrowband IoT and LoRa?
Well, yeah. So to answer a couple of questions in there, actually, the trial we did with the streetlights actually used a technology called Zigbee. We did have reservations about that at the time, but we went ahead with the trial anyway. It came to light that because it's such a short network and we're a largely rural area, that was going to be a lot of challenges when it came forward to doing wider scale rollout. In a town, it's fine because the street lights effectively talk to each other as opposed to talk to a gateway. But when you get out to a village that's got 3 street lights and then nothing else for miles, that was a massive problem. So we have learned, and obviously that's the point of doing the pilot, is to learn lessons. So we realised that wasn't suitable. We have looked at different types of technology. I think Neil mentioned earlier Sigfox, as well as another technology we looked at. And it is, it is a very, you can lose yourself for years in actually deciding what technology to use in the first place. We kind of settled on LoRaWAN purely because it seems to be kind of one of the bigger ones that when you're looking at devices, a lot of people write devices which work with LoRaWAN. That could be wrong. So, and again, that's open for debate still. But at the moment, we are looking at a LoRaWAN backend because a lot of the different, what we don't want is a different network for every different project we do. So streetlights are on one technology, smart bins are on one technology, street parking's on one. We want a network that's going to obviously work for all the different technologies going forward. And at the moment, the favourite for that seems to be LoRaWAN. So yes, we have considered, as I say, at some point you need to make a decision.
Okay, great. Thanks, Gary. And Neil Force, your thoughts on what Gary was mentioning then? You're just on mute at the moment. Yeah, so I was wondering around the comparison between narrowband IoT and LoRaWAN on this topic.
That question was for me. Sorry, it broke up slightly.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, so we have lots of experience with lots of technologies, and we are completely technology agnostic. There are many use cases and there are many ways to review a technology against a use case. And the truth of the matter is, there isn't one technology that wins out for all use cases over the others. So, for example, all our devices that we manufacture and we design and develop ourselves support LoRa, they support NB-IoT, they support Sigfox. And we choose which technology to use for the customer at the point with which we align and tailor our solutions to their application. There are lots of ways that you could argue which technology is better than the others, and many discussions, healthy discussions on the topic have been prevalent over the many years. And to draw a conclusion to this, there isn't a one-size-fits-all, one technology for all use cases. You have to be able to embrace the right technology for the right application at the right time in the right geography for the right customer. And that is sounds complicated, but from our perspective, that's the value that we provide in order to facilitate that solution deployment.
Yeah, and just building on that point, we had a question from Richard Bridge where he was asking about examples of different network protocols, and was asking whether they're based on public or private networks. So what's your experience there, Neil?
Okay, so again, let's take an example, smart parking. For smart parking, you have a very defined geography. You're in control of the topology of that geography. It's very little changes. Having a private network is quite a useful approach for a parking system. When you're looking at assisted living, for example, when you want to send devices through the post across the UK, then a private network is completely unsuitable. The number of private networks that don't allow roaming, that don't allow devices to connect are huge. So you need a national network for that application. For example, our assisted living solution has both NB-IoT and NB-IoT and Sigfox in the same product. Okay, if it doesn't find one, it uses the other. All right. But for smart parking today, we use just LoRa or NB-IoT. There are very specific applications that require an understanding of the benefits to be had for private versus public, national versus local, LoRa versus NB-IoT or Sigfox. So that's a dialogue, a debate that's been ongoing since the outset of IoT. But we have a very good understanding of how to be optimal in that selection.
Okay, great. And Gary, anything else to add to that from your experience?
No, I mean, just to go back what Neil said, I mean, most of the things he mentioned were something or LoRaWAN, which is hence kind of why we landed on LoRaWAN, because most things do support LoRaWAN as one of the options of their technology. I mean, on the private and public network, our intention is to put a private network in because obviously we're a customer, so you know all we're looking at is our own area and we want to serve ourselves. So obviously we're coming at it from a different angle to what Neil is. But what we'd like to do is in our sort of larger towns is to put a public LoRaWAN in, so that actually we were encouraging. Obviously, there's the college in Grantham. There's also there's a small technology centre that's affiliated to Lincoln University. So ideal is that we can say actually to those educational establishments or schools even, if you want to tap into this LoRaWAN network, then actually, you know, if you want to do some testing with devices, that you know you can use our public network to do that. And actually, one of our options is to encourage them to go into schools and actually do a little bit of with them and say, look, this network's available with a simple little device, like Neil was holding up a minute ago. You can start to capture some data and do a little bit of partnership with them if we can.
Okay, great. So we're running quite short on time. Maybe get time for another couple of brief questions in. So we have one here from John Pierce. He said, the use cases presented today look great. They seem to add value, but value is a measure of is measured in very different ways. In some cases, the ROI is black and white, so it's easily judged. In others, it may be more of a soft decision about whether to go on that particular line. For example, improved user experience, compliance, social benefits. So these are much harder to put a pound value on. How can the bean counters, as he phrases it, and local authorities judge and assign value in these cases? So I'll maybe start here with Neil Pryor.
That's a really good, I knew you were going to come to me, and it's a really good question. And it's not an easy answer to that one. There are, you know, local authorities are complex organizations with people who have different mindsets and outlooks. And yes, we have to balance the budget every year. But it's not just, and for me, you know, I came in and I had the transformation program, which everyone assumed was about cuts. And I've been really clear, it's not about cuts, actually. I've got a cabinet member for finance who wants to balance the budget. I want to make sure we invest the money in the right places. And so there has to be an element that it pays for itself. But there is also the social value aspect, which is really important. And again, through the LGA work that I've been really privileged to be exposed to, I've got involved in the social value movement there, which has themes, outcomes and measures as well. So these are definitely worth looking up, the social value TOMs as they're called, which is measuring, as you would suggest, the social value of investment for local authorities. And that's also a good framework for suppliers as well, actually, which I think John answered a similar question on. So with all of these things, you know, it's about who are you trying to sell to effectively, and what's the outcome going to be? And then if you can construct a business case that will touch upon all of those elements, so, you know, there has to be the financial element, but if you can also draw out the social value element, and you can draw out the impact on the council, on the communities, on the customer, then look at that business case in the round. Then you can get beyond the money, but it's difficult because the mindset has been very much, it's cuts, and it's been death by 1,000 cuts. And sometimes you've got to invest. So you can generally find the money, but you need to be able to find the right people to help you find the money. I hope that helps.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Neil. So I'm just going to go straight on to the next question so we can get through an additional one. So we have a question here for Gary. The low-cost environmental sensors do not generally provide very good accuracy. This is a question from Usman Raza. In comparison to weather stations, do you counsel that you've worked with, how is this data collected, and how is the data shared with the general public in this area? And if this data is shared, how do you go about sharing it?
Okay, so yeah, it was something that we asked as well when we did this. I mean, yes, you can spend thousands and thousands of pounds on environmental monitoring tools. This obviously is a much cheaper sensor. We did some calibration on it against other sources to ensure that, you know, it was fairly accurate in what it was collecting. We don't share data to the general public, and we don't use it for sort of publishing exact information. What we do though is use it for sort of trends. So, you know, from a fairly obvious point of view, the air quality sensor was at a bus station. 8 in the morning, the air quality was much worse than it was at 8 in the evening, because there's lots of buses in and out of the station. So we were kind of using it to map those ups and down trends of where the peaks and troughs were. We weren't taking absolute readings to say, you know, we are to the point, and weren't using it for sort of, you know, any sort of submission for legal information or etc. So it is an area you'd need to look at. You'd need to select carefully. I mean, some of our environmental monitors at the minute, the manual ones, sort of involve little cartridges inside and somebody going out and changing bits inside it, which are probably no more accurate than what this is. So yeah, it is a consideration, and we say we did express a similar concern, and we're assured that they are now very good at what they do. As I say, we did do some control data against other sources to show, like, the temperatures reading it was taking were accurate against what other weather stations were saying.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Gary. Well, we do have lots of other really good questions. We'll follow up with those questions afterwards, so we'll still answer those. So thank you very much for contributing there. Thank you very much as well for joining the webinar today. It's been a great attendance, so thank you very much. And also to our presenters and also to our panelists. Thank you as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. I wish everyone a good day.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.